The group set out the next morning, heading toward an abandoned research facility where Collins believed they could find better equipment. The road was eerily quiet, the surrounding forest thick with shadows. Mila walked close to Ellie, her face pale but determined. "Do you think they can really make a cure?" she asked. Ellie smiled faintly. "I think if anyone can, it's Collins." Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, splintering the silence. "Get down!" Jake shouted, pulling Mila behind a fallen log. A group of armed survivors emerged from the trees, their faces gaunt and desperate. "Drop your weapons," one of them barked. Jake raised his hand slowly, his eyes scanning the group. "We don't want trouble. You've got the cure," another man snarled, pointing at Mila. "We heard you talking about her. Hand her over, and we'll let you live." Ellie stepped in front of Mila. "You don't understand. She's not." "Shut up," the leader snapped, cocking his rifle. Marcus glanced at Jake, who gave a barely perceptible nod. "Now," Jake shouted, drawing his knife. He lunged at the nearest rogue, but more shots rang out. Ellie tackled Mila to the ground as chaos erupted. Collins was hit in the shoulder, collapsing with a cry. Marcus managed to wound one of the attackers, but they were outnumbered. "Take the girl," the leader shouted. Two rogues grabbed Mila, dragging her away as she screamed. Jake fought desperately, but a rifle butt to the head knocked him down. When the dust settled, Ellie and Marcus were left kneeling in the dirt, their hands bound. Jake lay unconscious nearby, blood trickling from his temple. Mila was gone. "We'll come back for you," the leader sneered, gesturing to his group. "But first, we've got to see if the girl's really worth all this trouble." As the rogues disappeared into the forest with Mila, Ellie clenched her fists, her mind racing. "We have to get her back," she said. Marcus nodded, his expression grim. "We will. But if they figure out what she is, they'll kill her, or worse." Ellie's heart sank as the first infected growls echoed in the distance. This chapter leaves the group fractured, Mila in the hands of dangerous rogues, and the stakes higher than ever. The rogue camp was a grim tableau of survival at any cost. Makeshift barricades surrounded the crumbling remains of an old factory. Fires burned in rusted barrels, casting flickering shadows on the gaunt faces of the rogues. Mila sat in a dark corner, her hands bound and her face streaked with dirt. She watched as the rogue leader, a wiry man with a patchy beard, paced in front of her. "You're valuable," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You're our ticket to safety. The people out there will pay a fortune for someone like you." Mila glared at him. "I'm not a thing you can sell." The leader leaned closer, his breath reeking of stale tobacco. "You don't get a say in this, girl. Either you cooperate, or we'll find another use for you." Ellie crouched beside Jake and Dr. Collins on a hill overlooking the camp. The glow of the fires illuminated the rogues' movements below. "There's too many of them," Collins whispered, clutching his wounded shoulder. "We don't have a choice," Jake said, his eyes fixed on the camp. "We get in, grab Mila, and get out. Fast and quiet." Ellie frowned. "What about Marcus? He should be here helping us." Jake shook his head. "He disappeared hours ago. We can't wait for him." Collins nodded reluctantly. "We'll need a distraction." Jake smirked, pulling out a Molotov cocktail he had cobbled together from supplies in the safe house. "I've got just the thing." The Molotov exploded against one of the barricades, sending flames and smoke into the air. The rogues scrambled to put out the fire, shouting orders and curses. Under the cover of chaos, Ellie and Jake slipped into the camp. Ellie found Mila tied to a post near the center of the camp. "Mila," she whispered, cutting the ropes. Mila's eyes widened. "Ellie, you came for me." "Of course," Ellie said, helping her stand. "Let's go." Jake covered their retreat, taking down a road with a swift blow to the head. "Move, now," he barked. The group made it to the edge of the camp when a familiar voice stopped them. "You're not going anywhere," Marcus said, stepping out of the shadows. Ellie froze, her heart sinking. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" Marcus held up his hands, his expression calm. "I'm not your enemy. I'm just doing what has to be done." Jake stepped forward, his gun raised. "Explain. Now." Marcus sighed. "I've been working for a group. Scientists, politicians, people who saw this outbreak coming. They wanted to control it, use it as leverage. Mila's immunity changes everything. She's the solution they've been looking for." Ellie stared at him in disbelief. "You've been lying to us this whole time. It wasn't supposed to go this far," Marcus said. "But now that we know what Mila's capable of, I can't let her go. She's too important." Mila shrank back, her eyes filled with fear. "You're just like them," she whispered. "You only see me as a tool." Jake took a step closer, his voice low and dangerous. "You're not taking her anywhere." Marcus smirked. "You don't have a choice." Their argument grew louder, echoing through the silent forest. Suddenly, a distant growl pierced the night. Ellie turned toward the sound, her stomach dropping. Oh no! Dozens of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness, followed by the guttural snarls of the infected. The noise from the camp had drawn a massive horde. "They're coming," Collins shouted. Jake grabbed Mila's arm. "Run!" The group sprinted into the forest, the infected close behind. Marcus hesitated, glancing back at the camp. "Marcus, move!" Ellie screamed. As the horde descended, tearing through the camp and its occupants, the group reached a narrow ravine. Jake turned to Marcus, fury in his eyes. "This is your fault," he growled. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but the infected were upon them. The group had no choice but to jump into the ravine, the cliffhanger leaving their fate uncertain as the infected swarmed above. The ravine was their last hope. The horde was closing in, a relentless wave of infected tearing through the underbrush, shrieking and moaning with hunger. Ellie's breath came in short gasps as she pulled Mila close, trying to shield her from the advancing masses. "We can't outrun them," Jake yelled over the noise, his back pressed against a jagged rock as he fired his pistol into the oncoming tide. The shots barely slowed the horde. "We have to fight our way out," Ellie said, desperation creeping into her voice. "There's no other way." Collins was at the front, clutching a rifle, his face pale and strained from his earlier injuries. "I'll hold them off," he said, his voice low but resolute. "Collins, no!" Ellie screamed as he stepped forward, firing a burst into the crowd of zombies, forcing them back. But there were too many. Too many. "Go!" Collins shouted. "Now!" Ellie hesitated, heart-wrenching in her chest, but Jake grabbed her arm. "We have to go." He knew what he was doing. Reluctantly, Ellie turned and ran, but not before hearing Collins' final cry. A shot, a scream, and then silence. The group pushed through the forest, the sounds of the horde still ringing in their ears. But the immediate danger wasn't the infected, it was Mila. "Mila, are you okay?" Ellie asked, concern lacing her voice as Mila stumbled behind them, her face pale, her eyes wide with confusion. I don't know," Mila whispered, shaking. "Something's wrong. I feel different. Like I can feel them. The infected. I can feel where they are. Suddenly, she froze in place, her body tensing as if listening to something no one else could hear. "They're near," Mila said, her voice eerie and calm. "What?" Jake looked around, alarmed. "Who's near?" But Mila was already moving, her eyes locked in a distant, unnerving stare. She broke into a sprint, faster than Ellie had ever seen her move. Without thinking, the group followed, trying to keep up. As they moved, the air around Mila seemed to hum with a strange energy. She dove into a clearing, crashing into the dirt, her hands stretching toward the ground. To Ellie's shock, the earth seemed to respond. Roots sprouted from the ground, twisting and growing rapidly, blocking the path of the zombies closing in on them. "What the hell?" Jake muttered, watching in awe. Mila gasped, her breath ragged. "I don't know what's happening. I didn't do that." Ellie knelt beside her, fear creeping into her chest. "Mila, we need to get you somewhere safe. This isn't normal." But Mila was trembling, and the strange abilities continued to manifest. She could sense their surroundings with terrifying clarity. It wasn't just physical. She was tapping into something much darker. After hours of running, they finally stumbled upon a crumbling government facility. It was abandoned, its walls decayed, but it was a temporary refuge. As they entered, there was a quiet tension between the group. Jake paced back and forth while Ellie checked the doors, ensuring they were secure. "I'll go check the back," Marcus said, turning to leave. "Wait," Jake said, "where are you going?" The doors locked down tight. But Marcus had already disappeared into the shadows. Ellie narrowed her eyes. Something about his behavior was off. She turned to Jake. "He's not coming back." "Damn right," Jake said, his fists clenched. "We trusted him." A few moments later, a faint noise echoed from the back of the building. A soft click of a door closing. Ellie's heart sank. They rushed toward the sound, but it was too late. Marcus was already outside, vanishing into the night, a flash drive clutched in his hand. "Mila's blood. It's the key," Marcus's voice echoed back to them from the shadows. "The organization needs her. They'll pay more than you ever could." "Marcus," Ellie shouted, but he was gone, the sound of his footsteps swallowed by the night. Ellie's gut churned with betrayal. He had used them, used Mila. The hope of finding a cure, the chance of survival, all for profit.